Welcome to Talking WoW, the podcast where we talk about World of Warcraft, believe it or not. My name is Tom, and today we are going to be talking about the race to world first in Aberrus. Is it really a race if it's over? I'm not too sure. But to discuss this further is a very special guest from across the pond, as we like to say on this podcast. And that is Mike. Hey, Mike.
Hey, happy to be here. This is a fun one because we are talking the race to world first. And as you mentioned, I am from the NA, or as we like to call it over here, the winning side. So I'm excited to talk about this with you guys.
And also here today, sitting in the corner with a box of tissues. That doesn't sound very good. Is our European representative for talking about racing to world first. It is Marty. Hello, Marty.
Hello, I am not from the NA, I'm from the region of the world where we had the fastest kill, so yeah, I guess that's a thing now, apparently.
I feel like I gotta step in here and be like a referee. I am wearing like black and white stripes on my shirt right now, so I feel like I need to ring a bell and just go, whoa, we haven't even started yet, the gloves aren't even on. And yeah, we're here to talk about Race to World First in Aberrus, which launched in 10.1 in Dragonflight. And if you don't know what the Race to World First is,
well,
then I got news for you. Either do I. I don't have any idea what it is. I don't even know why I'm here to talk about it. But basically, it's when the top guilds in the world come together and they race to beat the end boss of a raid on the highest difficulty, and then they get massive bragging rights. And there's lots of fierce competition, especially from the fans. You might have heard that already. But to kick us off here, Mike, what is it about Race to World First in general that you like and you've enjoyed watching it over the years?
First off, I think that the reason why a lot of people enjoy it is the same reason that a lot of people enjoy watching sports. Is that you're watching the best players in the world doing the same thing that you feel that you can do, just a whole lot better, and to a level that it's like watching basketball. It's like, I know I could never do the things that they're doing, but I can still dribble a basketball, I can still shoot, I can still do a Mythic Plus, and I could still join a raid. But could I do Mythic? Probably not. And could I do Mythic at the level and the gear that they're doing? Definitely not. So for me, that's what is extremely exciting about it, is just seeing these guys on the bleeding edge, creating the strats as they go, and just jumping in there and making a mockery of the bosses.
What about you, Marty? Because you and Mike, I've known you both for a long time, too long, some might say. And I know that every time a new raid comes out, you two are always bantering about Race to World First. And like Mike says, with that aspect of sports, you do have that taking a side and supporting a team, so to speak. In this regard, it's more like region versus region. And so what has it been like for you watching Race to World First? Because I know you're not really a big sports person outside of potentially esports, but you seem to have this rivalry and competition in you. So what does it mean to you?
I mean, all the stuff that Mike already mentioned, and obviously,
Wait, you're agreeing with your competitor?
I am agreeing with my competitor, yeah, because, sports is not always just, it's not just about being against each other, because we're all playing the same sport. So technically, we're all on the same side. We just want to be better at it than the other one, So, but no, I'm a raider as well myself, so it's just interesting to see, these people playing it on such a higher level than we can do. And to be fair, Mike, I'm pretty sure you would be able to do Mythic as well. I think the main difference is that if you were going to do it, you would have a way higher item level than these players who are going in here world first and doing it.
I knew there was going to be some sort of burn there.
It's not a burn.
That's a fact.
No, it's not. It's not a burn. I have been raiding Mythic Plus as well, and when we are going in there, we have higher item level than the raid when the race to world first people go in there because
I'm just trying to bounce you two off each other. I'm just trying to stoke the coals here.
Because when they go in and do it, they only have had access to some of this mythic gear for like what they got that week, unless it's going into 2 weeks, then they have 2 weeks worth of gear, where when my guild, when I did it, when we arrived at the last boss, we have been clearing mythic, the other bosses for quite a while.
Yeah.
So most people had most of the gear when we got to the last boss, and that helps a lot.
With the introduction of patch 10.1, we get a new raid, which is Aberrus. Like Mike's totally spoiled at the start of the episode. Not that it was really much of a thing to keep a secret, but North America have the bragging rights this time, with Liquid Guild getting the first kill on Sarkareth, the end boss there. How was this, Mike? Like, can you give us a little summary from what happened over in America? Because I'm sure all the news outlets were covering it a lot differently from over here in Europe.
The BBC was completely skewed.
What was going on from the American side? Because I know in the past, and correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I am not a Risk World First expert here. I just host a podcast. From what I've gathered and read in the past, Europe have been quite a dominant force when it comes to Race to World First. But now, North America have that bragging right, that gold medal. So how does that feel?
I mean, it's always fun to be, as we might say, it's like on the winning side, It's always a good feeling. I think, if I'm correct, Marty can correct me here, but until Limit, at the time they were Limit, which is now Liquid, at the time when they were Limit and they actually got their first Race to World First title, EU had dominated the scene for I think the past 8 years or something like that. And then before then, you had obviously those older guilds in the older raids, like Wrath the Lich King and things like that. And that was a mix between Oceanic and EU guilds. So NA was never really a huge player in the scene overall, I felt. And then when Limit/Liquid kind of started coming onto the scene, it was a great feeling, because all of a sudden you have, at the time it was just the two guilds, Limit and Echo, it was Limit and Method at the time going at it, and it was really fun to watch from both sides. But it was very obvious that Method still had everything kind of in the bag, and we were just kind of lucky to be in there. And then we got the win, and it was a great feeling, and then they took it back again. And then everything kind of split back, where it became Echo, Method still had their thing, and then now it's Liquid. But from our side, watching it this time, it was very exciting in terms of there was a lot more guilds involved, it felt. Like, for the most part. There was a lot more guilds within striking distance, and we can get into the reasoning behind that a little later. But I enjoy watching both streams. So it was fun waking up in the morning and putting on Echo until Liquid woke up, and then putting on Liquid and watching and seeing the difference play out between the two guilds and how they approach things. But at least from my perspective, I really had a blast watching it, as I usually did.
Yeah, I mean, if I should add anything, I think the main difference between, for me at least, for this time around and all the previous times, is that I actually were quite busy. No, so I actually didn't watch a lot of it this time around. But what I did, when I did watch, was towards the end. And one thing that sort of, sprung into my eyes quite quickly was that, sure, Echo had caught up to Liquid this time around. I think Echo did very well up until the last boss, from what I gather. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, if you watch more than I have, but that's the feeling that I got, that Echo was actually there quite fast. But it seems like, and I don't know if it's because, Liquid had a different strat or what it was, but I could see that their, pull count was lower than Echo's, but they had a better percentage, and that's usually, a good sign if you want to kill it, that, less pulls, better percentage, then you're probably doing something right.
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier, I think that Echo had a faster kill, which they were there in less times, but it has also been shown or said that, sorry, the baby in the background is starting to go wild. Let me grab
She's
her.
clearly
real
an
quick.
Echo fan. It sounds like she's like, yeah, Echo is better. That's what I'm hearing her saying.
I don't think that's what she's saying. But it would be said that we had less pulls, so roughly people equate that to a cleaner kill, right? Like a cleaner kill. And I think that I don't necessarily know if it was a better strat rather than they settled into it a little easier and a little quicker than what Echo did. But I think that Echo had a fantastic pace throughout the raid. Obviously, these are the top guilds in the world, so us critiquing them is not really something that is like a thing, but it could
absolutely it is.
And obviously, all of the players have their own opinions on it as well, for better or for worse. So
just comparing it to sport again, I was like, haven't you ever seen fans in a sporting event? They are absolutely critiquing everything. If somebody doesn't make that basket or hits that home run, or to bring it back to Europe, if someone doesn't score a goal with a football, just gotta keep this conversation balanced with how we're talking about being more American or European right now, because this is
this is a global podcast.
Exactly.
Just like the race. But no, I actually do think that it's actually kind of nice that Liquid could take one as well this time around, because if it's just one-sided all the time, there's not really a lot of fun to it. So sure, we lost now, but now we have even a better reason to perform even better next time. So,
and on that note, I might take over just a little bit of Tom's mediator ability here and kind of transition us into Marty. I don't know.
It's fine. I'll go home. It's
bye, Tom.
Just leave the link up. We'll take it from here. I don't know how much, Marty, you heard about it, but it was going around that generally this was a bit of an easier raid in terms of tuning. Now, I did hear, at least from Max, who is a part of Limit, he was actually a fan of the tuning and said that he thought that other than a couple bosses that could have been a bit more difficult and maybe the raid could have been a little more difficult overall, he felt like it was actually pretty well done. There weren't any sneaky nerfs in the last moments there by Blizzard to make something more manageable. And at least from the viewer perspective, because this was a short raid, it was done within one reset, and personally, I found that to be much more enjoyable than some of the previous ones that we've had.
I do feel like I actually do kind of like when it goes into second reset. But I think part of it is also because something that has been that has changed up is that all the difficulties are out at the same time now, instead of Mythic being postponed a little bit afterwards. And I feel like for a player that is probably awesome, but for the race, I actually kind of dislike that a little bit, because then we start out with just having a lot of normal splits, heroic splits, and splits are just boring.
I'm going to stop you right there, because I don't know what splits are, and I want you to explain to me.
I'll explain
what
it
is
too.
Splits, and why is it not an ice cream?
I mean, it potentially could be an ice cream. I don't know about that, but splits are when you go into. You have your raid roster. Each player has X amount of characters that they need to try and gear, because it's down to luck as well, which character is then being the final character. So what you do is that you utilize the dungeon finder. So you set a team of X amount of people from your team, and then you get the audience to join in, and the audience agrees that they're going to be paid in gold, like I don't know how many millions that they get to participate. I'm not even kidding you. That is what they're paid. And then they just forfeit any loot drops. And what they then do is that they're gathering all the loot, they're putting it into a spreadsheet. That character that is carrying the loot is being locked out, and then they repeat that on different characters until they've done it like 15 times, 20 times, how many times it takes for each class and whatever characters they want to bring. And then they have the spreadsheet, and they can figure out, all right, we can gear this character, that character, and that character, and then they lock those characters back in that is holding all the loot, because you have 2 hours, and that count out stops when you're logging out. So you have 2 hours to divide the loot, and that is a split.
So to simplify this in my brain, and maybe anyone else who's not deep into Race to World First, this is basically a like fast track to gearing characters so that
Yes.
they can compete better in the raids.
Yes.
Which, to me, that sounds absolutely bizarre. When you think of Race to World First, you think, okay, you've got these very fancy cars at the start line and someone waves the flag and they go. You don't expect, hang on, we're going to have to build the car first before we start the race.
It's part of the race, but I think one thing that is actually kind of cool with this is that you get the audience to participate as well. So I think there is that aspect to it, that on the stream, if you can help your team out, the team that you're rooting for. I don't really think that you, Tom, can go and to the local football team, whoever you support, and help them, play ball. I don't think.
I mean, I could probably wash their kits or something like that.
So I do like that aspect, but from just a straight viewing point of view, I really don't like splits. It's boring.
And that's probably my point. Although this is a community event, or essentially, it's not an official thing run by Blizzard. It's the guilds that are running this and have the sponsorship behind it and are putting in the production value behind it. I think when it comes to an event that you want to watch and it's supposed to be that spectacle, I don't know if the aspect of that side of things would interest me. And almost, if someone was like, hey, I'm going to watch this Race to World First, and they tune in on the first day and they see someone doing a bunch of Mythic Dungeons, are they just going to be like, well, I'm not going to watch somebody do Mythic Dungeons. Like, this is boring. Like, I thought the race had started. And then you're not really going to know when the race actually starts, because it could just start anytime if it's dependent on the drops people are getting. So, I don't know. When you think of race, you think of this fixed, like, start time and potential end time. And from what I've heard about the tuning of this raid as well, I think, yeah, you probably do want it to be done and dusted within a week, perhaps, because if this thing goes on for weeks or months, I don't think it's ever gone on for months, but people are just going to lose interest. An event like this has to probably have the hype of a week or so for people to stay engaged, because we get distracted very easy, don't we, Mike?
Yes. So that's been a talking point as well, is that it was done really quickly, and like I said, it was done before the first reset. Part of the issue that people are having was that, like you said, the first 2 days at least are spent doing splits and Mythic Plus and getting the gear before you even head into Mythic. That used to not be an issue because Mythic used to be released later, so the guilds would do all of that stuff before the race actually began. So when the Race to World First began, it would already be in Mythic, and then you would see it. I'm actually a fan of having like Mythic come out later and letting the guilds do whatever they need to do beforehand, because like you said, if you're a casual viewer, you're not going to watch splits all the time.
Not even if you are like a full-blown fan, as I am. I'm also, they're still doing splits, all right, I'll turn it off and come back later.
And it's not like depending on the time of day, more than likely they're not just going to suddenly jump into it and be like, all right, let's do it. It's more of like, okay, we've done everything that we can for today, let's log off and come back tomorrow and then jump into Mythic then. Now, it's a necessary part. They have to do it in order to be in the best position that they can, in order to actually be able to kill the bosses. So I think they should go back to the previous method of making sure that Heroic, they have their time beforehand and then they release Mythic. I think that if they were going to make a change to Blizzard in terms of how they release it, obviously this is the age-old debate of EU versus NA, NA getting the raid first, being beta testers versus just starting it at the same time. I think that they should release it at the same time for both EU and NA, so that both guilds can get it, start fresh together at the same time.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of talk on Twitter after this about sort of reiterating that point of, we have expansions releasing on a global scale now. Why can't we have patches coming out on the same day as well? And we're almost in, getting into 20 years now of Warcraft, and this is still something that hasn't changed. Can you see it changing, Marty?
I mean, I think the main issue is not so much the global release and the global release itself. I don't think it's the big issue. The issue is if we go into, the second, what are we calling it again? The second reset. Because if they're not finished within 1 week, when will the second reset then be? Because will that also be globally the same, or will that then go back to normal Tuesday, Wednesday? And then I sort of think then we're back, and then we'll have that issue instead. Because the issue is that if it's a really, really, tight last boss and they don't kill it, both teams are at the last boss and they're, doing good progress, and then the reset hits. Then Limit will have that day advance to go get some, do another clear, get better gear, and then go kill the end boss straight off. Because that's
Here's a terrible idea.
Mm-hmm.
You don't reset. Like, no reset or maintenance takes place until that boss dies, and the whole player base of World of Warcraft got torches and pitchforks.
Yeah, that's definitely not going to happen. And to a certain extent, in certain aspects, you don't want that to happen, because we're kind of in a weird space with this raid where nothing was really felt like it was unkillable, right? Like, it felt like Blizzard actually nailed, if not a little too easy, but they nailed in what they needed to do. But I think that the tuning was done in a way where they didn't need the reset, and that was really good.
I think we're also slowly coming to an end, so I don't know, Tom, do you have any questions about the race that something that you have been wondering while watching it, or are you an expert in the race to World First now?
Well, yeah, see, I've never really watched Race to World First, which I think we've established over the course of this podcast so far, but I did make the effort to watch a little bit more of it this time. And actually, I saw the kill happen while I was on a call with Mike, and we were playing Dungeons and Dragons while Marty was DMing, and Marty didn't get to see it. So I feel like I got to experience what that thrill was like. And it was very exciting watching the final encounter. It was like you say, it was like the last lap in a Formula One race or something like that, where, it was all going down. Yeah, that was very exciting. One thing I suppose it's highlighted to me that still I think is an issue, and that's simply because World of Warcraft was never built to be an esports game back when it first came out. Like, that was not really a consideration. Is I still find it very hard to understand what's going on just by looking at the game. I will give big kudos to the guilds taking part in this, because they have these overlays which give so much more detail than it could ever be displayed in game.
And I think that's why we have the casters, and I think the casters are doing such a good job at also explaining what is happening, because it is difficult to see. So I think we need to give kudos to the casters as well a lot of the time.
Again, it just comes back to that point of Warcraft was never built for this. That was never the if they made the game again, if they make WoW 2, they're definitely going to consider visually, this game needs to be better for somebody that's spectating it, for Mythic Invitationals or Race to World First or PvP or, things like that, because it just reminds me of as much as I love playing this game, I find it really hard watching people play. But like you say, when you have that commentary, that definitely adds a lot, because people are able to explain this boss is doing this ability right now and that needs to be interrupted, or this is what they're doing right now so they don't wipe. And I think that is an interesting thing that helps you learn.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that and just say that I think that the casters are doing an amazing job. Obviously, you have the casting for Echo as well as Limit. They got more big names on there too. Both groups have YouTubers and stuff like that as their analysts that you can use. They have experts that are experts in healing. You have Automatic Jack over on Limit side, talking about all the healing aspects and things like that. Even on Method side, they have their production up and running again as well. They're starting to build that back up. And I think that, as with most sports, you need that element to keep people engaged, especially during splits or multiple pools of a boss, where to the average viewer, or even not just so average, you're wondering why did they die? What happened? So they do a great job on making sure that we know what's going on.
We've had a lot of talk about Race to World First and what that is, and conversations about what that potentially needs to look like in the future. But if you could make one change to Race to World First, which you think would make it much better for the competitors and the spectators, what would you change?
I mean, I think we already touched a little bit about it, but, the don't have to watch splits, or at least, not all of the splits, would be, something that would improve or bring it back to how it were earlier. I think that is something that is on my personal wish list. I don't know the solution to this. I don't know how it would work, but again, as we mentioned, the global release, that everyone can start at the same time. I don't know how much it would matter in the end, but at least, you can squash some of all those who were saying like, yeah, but the NA got it before the EU and, stuff like that. So a little bit more of an even playing field. But then again, you know what? I'm actually also kind of just enjoying it as it is right now, that it's actually community driven and things like that.
I think that I don't know how they would make it work, but I think if they had a raid server, if they go back to having Mythic release separate from Heroic, then guilds do all the prep that they need to, and then they import their characters to this raid server, and the raid server goes live at the same time for anyone, I would say anyone that wanted to race the world first, they would say it ahead of time, and they would be able to be on this server, and then at a certain time, they would all kind of log on to that server, and it would be controlled by Blizz or whatever, and they'd all be able to start at the same time. I think that would be a pretty cool idea, and it would be everyone starting on even footing, at least for that aspect.
Do you think if they did something like that, they'd have to release the raid exclusively to this, I'm going to say, tournament realm? Do you think they'd have to release that earlier, because then there's still not other guilds like on live servers taking part in Mythic raiding as well? And do you think also that would potentially drive more interest, because that's the only place where players like, me or you could see this content happening?
That I don't know. I don't know if you want to release it earlier for those guilds, because then that creates a dynamic of then Blizzard is going to have to be involved too much, where they have to filter who is saying that they're actually going to be a part of this race to world first versus who just wants to get into the raid early but has like no real chance of doing it or whatever. Obviously we have the names of guilds and things like that, but maybe they just make it a realm, right? Like the realm comes out, and I don't know, it's difficult because there are certain things, like this raid showed that they locked certain things, like the legendary item, they locked it behind a world first kill, or at least a realm first, or a region, right? It was a region based kill for the legendary. So once Echo and Limit down Sarkareth, then it allowed everyone to be able to get that legendary Drakthir weapon. So I like stuff like that. I think it's pretty cool that stuff has ramifications. It goes all the way back to Encourage, when everyone was trying to be Scarab Lord, and then once you did it, like that was kind of it, right? Yeah. I like that kind of atmosphere, and I feel like it's community driven in that sense. So the more that I think about it, the more I don't like my realm idea.
I can add one more thing that I think would go away, that I would find a shame in a tournament realm like that, or a realm like that, and that is that there is some raiding guilds among US EU that are just like, we're raiding one day and that is on release, because we might get that one kill up there on the list before the other guilds move in there, and I think that would go away, and that I think that is a charm to it that I kind of like as well.
I kind of like that too, right? Like it shows that the race in itself is so much bigger than just these 2 or 3 guilds, right? Like it's not just these 2. There were 4 bosses down in Mythic, I think, before Limit or Echo even stepped foot in there. And those guilds, they knew they weren't going to down Sarkareth before them, but just like you said, they probably wanted to see their
15 minutes of fame.
Yeah, they got their names up there. They could like type in the chat, "Look at me, I'm on there." Like, notice me. But I don't know, there's so much that goes into it, right? There's so much, like Tom mentioned earlier, it has blown up bigger than what anyone ever could have thought, and we just kind of take it as it goes and enjoy the aspects of that we do, right? There's positives and negatives that go into it, but for the most part, I think the guilds have a good time doing it, and they're usually in better spirits about it than the player base. Just like actual sports.
That's all we had for this episode of Talking WoW, but some great points raised there by Mike and some by Marty as well. But what did you think? Do you agree with anything that's been said on this podcast? Do you disagree with anything that's been said? I'm sure you do. And you can let us know any feedback you have in the places that you do that. Very big thank you again for Mike and Esme for joining us on this episode where we were talking about the race to world first. I've been Tom, that has been Marty, and we've been talking WoW. Bye!
Oh, bye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Bye. Goodbye.
Thanks for tuning in, champion! Did you enjoy this episode of Talking WoW? If so, why not drop a review on your podcast catcher of choice, or leave us a comment? You can find Talking WoW on Twitter or YouTube over at Talking WoW. Hope to see you again soon!